I was 17 when I learned that the person who is supposed to protect you from the world is sometimes the one most afraid of your light. That a mother can look at her daughter's future and see not possibility, but competition. That the word no can be spoken without ever moving your lips. It can be the sound of paper burning in a kitchen sink, while the person who lit the match tells you it was never meant to be. My name is Sophie. I'm 32 years old. I teach literature at a community college in a town where the most famous writer is the man who writes the obituaries for the local paper. I live in a one-bedroom apartment with water stains on the ceiling that I call abstract art when maintenance asks if I want them fixed. I have 17 students this semester. 4 of them will finish the creative writing unit. One of them will make me cry with a poem about her grandmother. None of them know that I was supposed to be a writer once. That I was accepted into one of the finest writing programs in the country. That my mother burned the letter in front of me and told me I had been rejected. That I have been writing in secret for 15 years, poems hidden in shoeboxes, essays saved on thumb drives labeled tax documents 2014, because the person who was supposed to cheer for me taught me that my voice was dangerous. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Sophie, and this is the channel where we talk about the things families do to each other when they think no one is watching. If you've ever had someone look at your dream and see a threat, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone. And if you've already subscribed, thank you. You make it possible for stories like mine to find the people who need them. Here's my story. I grew up in a house that smelled like lemon cleaner and disappointment. My mother, Linda, was 36 when I was born, already bitter, already tired, already convinced that life was a series of doors that had closed on her before she had the chance to walk through them. She had been a singer once. Not famous. Not even professional. She sang in a band in bars around Ohio during her 20s, and she had a voice that my father said could make a man forget his own name. But she married him at 25, had my brother Jake at 28, had me at 36, and by the time I was old enough to remember her humming while she washed dishes, she had stopped singing entirely. She said it was because her voice changed after 2 pregnancies. I think it was because she couldn't bear to hear herself sound happy. My father left when I was 9, not dramatically. He just packed a bag one Tuesday, kissed Jake on the head, looked at me like he was trying to remember my name, and walked out to his truck. He sent birthday cards for 2 years, then stopped. I don't know where he is now. My mother says he lives in Florida with a woman who sells real estate. I have never called him. I have never written. He is a ghost in a story that stopped being interesting a long time ago. Jake is 4 years younger than me. He has autism moderate, she would say, as if his condition were a temperature or a spice level. He is nonverbal in stressful situations, brilliant with patterns and numbers, and he experiences the world with an intensity that I have always found beautiful and my mother has always found exhausting. When Jake was diagnosed at 4, something in my mother calcified. She became a martyr without a cause, a woman who wore her sacrifice like armor. Every conversation became about what she had given up. Every request became a debt. Every glance at Jake was a reminder that her life had been decided for her and that someone had to pay. I became the payment. I was a good student. Not because I was particularly disciplined, but because books were the only place I could be loud. I read everything, the classics my mother considered pretentious, the paperbacks I stole from the library sale bin, the poetry collections I found in my grandmother's attic. I wrote my first poem when I was 11. It was about a bird that couldn't fly because its cage was made of sky. I showed it to my mother. She read it, folded it in half, and said, "That's nice, Sophie, but poetry doesn't pay the electric bill. Go set the table." I learned to hide my writing the way other kids learn to hide cigarettes or report cards. I kept notebooks under my mattress. I wrote in the bathroom with the fan on so no one could hear the pen scratching. I submitted to school literary magazines under a fake name, Eleanor Vance, stolen from a Shirley Jackson novel, and when I won second place in a state competition at 16, I told my mother I had been helping a friend edit. The certificate went in my backpack. The poem went in my heart. And the dream, the real dream, the one I barely dared to think about, went into a sealed envelope addressed to the Iowa Writers' Workshop. Iowa was a myth to me, a place where people sat in cornfields and wrote sentences that changed lives. I knew the acceptance rate was less than 3%. I knew I was a 17-year-old girl from a town of 4,000 people with no connections and no pedigree. But my English teacher, Mrs. Gable, had read my portfolio and cried. She had gone to Iowa. She said, "You have a voice, Sophie, not a good voice for your age. A good voice, period. You need to be heard." I applied in secret. I used the school computer to fill out the forms. I paid the application fee with babysitting money I had saved for prom dress I never bought. I sent them 15 poems, a personal essay about growing up in a house where language was only valued when it was used to ask for things, and a letter from Mrs. Gable that called me the most promising young writer she had encountered in 20 years of teaching. I waited 4 months. The letter arrived on a Thursday in April. I remember because it was raining, and the mailbox was at the end of our gravel driveway, and I ran to it without a jacket because I had seen the envelope through the little window, cream-colored heavy paper, the return address embossed in navy blue. The University of Iowa, Graduate College. I was 17. I was shaking so hard I could barely open the latch. I pulled the envelope out and I knew before I read the first line, because acceptance letters feel different. They feel like invitations to a party you didn't think you'd be allowed to attend. "Dear Miss Sophie Brennan," it began. "The faculty of the Iowa Writers' Workshop have reviewed your application with great care, and it is our pleasure to offer you admission." I read it 3 times standing in the rain. A full fellowship, tuition covered, a stipend, housing arranged. They wanted me. They had read my poems about my brother's hands and my mother's silence, and the way the Midwestern sky could look like a promise or a warning depending on the hour, and they had wanted me. I ran inside. I was going to call Mrs. Gable. I was going to tell Jake. He wouldn't understand the details, but he would understand that I was happy, and his happiness for me was always pure, uncomplicated by jealousy. I was going to tell my mother. I was going to say, "I know you think this is foolish. I know you think I should stay and help with Jake and get a practical job and be the strong daughter. But I got in. And I have to go because if I don't go, I will spend the rest of my life wondering who I could have been." I found her in the kitchen. She was standing at the stove, stirring something that smelled like canned soup and resentment. She was still in her bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon. She had been beautiful once. I could see it in photos from before I was born when her eyes were bright and her posture was straight and she looked at the camera like she had secrets. Now she looked at the stove like it owed her money. "Mom," I said. My voice was breathless. My hair was dripping rain onto the linoleum. "Mom, I need to tell you something." She turned. She looked at the envelope in my hand. She looked at my face, flushed, alive, glowing with a joy she hadn't seen in me since I was small enough not to know better, and I saw something shift in her expression. Not pride, not happiness. Assessment, the same look she gave the electric bill when it was higher than expected. "What is that?" she asked. "It's from Iowa, the writing program." "Mom, I got in. I got a full scholarship, everything paid, I can go. I can." She took the envelope from my hand, not gently, not violently, just removed it. Like she was taking away a toy I wasn't old enough to play with. She opened it, she read it. Her face didn't change, not a muscle, not a flicker. Then she walked to the sink, pulled a match from the drawer where she kept them for the gas stove, and lit the letter on fire. I screamed. I lunged for it. She held me back with one arm. She was stronger than she looked, fueled by some rage I didn't understand, and we watched the cream-colored paper curl and blacken in the stainless steel sink. The words that had been written to me, the invitation, the validation, turned to ash and smoke that smelled like dreams burning. "Mom," I whispered. I was crying. I was 17 and I was watching my future turn to ash and I didn't understand. Why would you? It doesn't matter," she said. Her voice was flat, final, the voice of a woman who had made a decision and would not be questioned. "You weren't accepted, Sophie. I read it. It says they're sorry but they can't offer you a place. The fellowship is for graduate students. Older students, not a child who hasn't even finished high school." "That's not true," I said. I read it outside. It said I got in. It said you read what you wanted to read," she said. She turned back to the stove, stirred her soup. "That's your problem. Sophie, you live in a fantasy world. You think you're special, you're not. You're a mediocre student from a mediocre town with mediocre poems. They sent you a nice rejection, that's all, a form letter, and you're standing here crying over nothing." She reached into the pocket of her bathrobe and pulled out a folded piece of paper. White, thin, different paper than the letter I had held. She handed it to me. "Here's the real letter," she said. "I didn't want you to see it. I thought it would crush you, but if you're going to act like this, you need to see the truth." I unfolded it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "Dear Miss Brennan," it read, "thank you for your interest in the Iowa Writers' Workshop. We regret to inform you that we are unable to offer you admission at this time. It looked official. It had the letterhead. It was typed. It was cruel in the way that form letters are cruel, polite, distant, absolute. I didn't know then that my mother had worked at the library for 10 hours a week, that she had access to a photocopier, to letterhead templates, to the kind of petty forgery that a woman with a grudge and a typewriter could accomplish between her shift and her cigarette break. I didn't know that she had intercepted the mail that morning, that she had read my acceptance and decided, in the space of a single breath, that I would not be allowed to have what she had lost. I only knew that the person I trusted most in the world had looked at my joy and seen a fire that needed to be extinguished. "I'm sorry, baby," she said, and her voice softened. The performance began. "I know it hurts, but it's for the best. You wouldn't have survived there. Those people, they're rich, they're connected, they would have eaten you alive, and Jake needs you. You know he does. Your father is gone. I'm alone here. I'm falling apart, Sophie. I need you. We need you. Family is what matters, not some poem." She turned to me then and her eyes were wet. Real tears or good ones. I couldn't tell the difference at 17. I only knew that she was my mother and she was crying and I had never seen her cry before. "You're the strong one," she said. "You've always been the strong one. Jake needs his sister. I need my daughter. Please, Sophie, don't make me beg." I didn't go to my room. I went to Jake's. He was sitting on his bed, lining up his toy cars in order of color: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and he looked up when I came in. He didn't say anything. He never said much. But he reached out and touched my wet hair, and he made a sound, not a word, just a hum that I understood to mean "I'm here." "You're here, that's enough." I stayed. I stayed because I was 17 and I believed her. I stayed because Jake's touch was the only love I trusted not to burn. I stayed because I thought being strong meant letting someone else decide what you were allowed to want. I got a job at the gas station on Route 9. I worked the register from 3 to 11, came home, helped Jake with his routines, and then when the house was asleep, I wrote in notebooks I kept under my mattress. I wrote about Iowa, about the letter, about the smell of paper burning. I wrote about a girl who watched her future turn to ash and learned to breathe smoke. I never applied again. Not to Iowa, not anywhere. What was the point? I had been rejected. I wasn't good enough. My mother had read the letter, the real letter, the one she showed me, and she would know. She was the only person who had ever been honest with me about my limitations. Everyone else, Mrs. Gable, the teachers, the friends who said they loved my poems, they were just being nice. Just sparing my feelings. My mother was the one who told me the truth. That's what I believed for 15 years. Mrs. Gable retired when I was 19. She sent me a card, a handwritten note that said, "I'm so sorry about Iowa. I thought you were a shoo-in. Please keep writing. The world needs your voice." I threw it away. I couldn't bear the pity. I couldn't bear the reminder that I had failed publicly, that people had expected things from me that I couldn't deliver. I moved out of my mother's house when I was 22, not far, just to an apartment 3 blocks away, because Jake still needed me, and guilt is a leash that stretches but never breaks. I got my teaching certificate. I started at the community college, freshman composition, introduction to poetry, the classes that no one takes unless they have to. I was good at it. I could spot a student with talent from the first paragraph of their first essay. I could coax voices out of silence. I told myself that helping others find their words was enough. That being the midwife to other people's stories was a noble calling, that my own stories were better left unwritten. I visited my mother every Sunday. I brought groceries. I listened to her complain about her back, about her neighbors, about the way Jake's therapists didn't understand him. I nodded. I agreed. I said, "You're right, Mom. That must be hard." I was the good daughter. The strong daughter, the one who had accepted her place in the world without complaint. And every night I wrote, in secret, in shame, poems about mothers who burned letters, about brothers who communicated in colors, about women who swallowed their voices until they became stones in their chests. I wrote because not writing felt like dying. I wrote because it was the only place I could still be 17, standing in the rain, holding an envelope that smelled like possibility. I told myself it was a hobby. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that most people never get to live their dreams, and that accepting that was what adulthood meant. I almost believed it. My grandmother died in February. Helen, my father's mother, though she had outlasted her son's interest in the family by decades. She was 87, and she had been the only adult in my childhood who asked to read my poems and didn't fold them in half. She lived in a nursing home the last 3 years of her life, The same one my mother refused to visit because it smells like death and the nurses are rude. I visited every other Tuesday. I brought her books. She couldn't see well enough to read anymore, so I read to her poetry mostly. Mary Oliver, Adrienne Rich, Sharon Olds. Women who wrote about the body, about motherhood, about the violence and tenderness of being alive in a female form. She died in her sleep. Peaceful, they said. I was the one who cleaned out her room. My mother was too distraught, though I hadn't seen her shed a tear. Jake was confused by death in the way he was confused by all abstract concepts. He understood absence but not permanence. I went alone. The room was small. A bed, a chair, a closet, a nightstand. It took me 2 hours to pack her clothes, her books, the framed photos of people long dead. In the back of the closet, behind a stack of blankets, I found a box. Cardboard, unlabeled, taped shut with yellowed Scotch tape. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Letters my grandfather had written her during the war. Letters my father had written from summer camp when he was 9. Letters from cousins, from friends, from a life that had been lived fully and documented carefully. And at the bottom, in a manila envelope, a cream-colored letter. Heavy paper. Embossed return address. The University of Iowa, Graduate College. My hands shook the same way they had at 17. I opened it. Dear Miss Sophie Brennan, it began. The faculty of the Iowa Writers' Workshop have reviewed your application with great care, and it is our pleasure to offer you admission. It was the original, the real one. The letter I had held in the rain. I knew it by the weight of the paper, by the ink, by the way my name looked typed in that particular font. It was not a copy. It was the letter, the one that had been in my hands for 4 to 7 seconds before my mother took it and burned it in the sink. There was a note clipped to it. My grandmother's handwriting, shaky, the letters drifting uphill like they were trying to escape the page. Sophie, my love, I found this in Linda's trash the week after you graduated high school. I don't know what she told you. I don't know why she did what she did. I have spent 15 years trying to find the courage to give this to you, and 15 years failing because I was afraid of what would happen to our family if I did. I told myself that you were happy, that you had made your peace, that some secrets are kinder kept, but I am dying now and the dead have no use for kindness. They only have use for truth. You got in, Sophie. You got in. You were always good enough. You were always brilliant. And I am so sorry that I was too much of a coward to tell you while I was alive. Burn this if you need to, but know that someone believed in you. Someone saw your light and did not want to put it out. I love you. I am sorry. Grandma Helen, I sat on the floor of that nursing home room for an hour. I didn't cry. I had forgotten how. I just held the letter and stared at the wall where someone had hung a generic landscape painting, a barn, a sunset, a lie about the beauty of the rural Midwest, and I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart, something deeper. The foundation. The thing I had built my whole life on, the belief that my mother was the honest one, that she had protected me from rejection, that I wasn't good enough, and she had been kind enough to soften the blow. That foundation turned to dust. She had burned it. She had forged a rejection letter. She had lied, not to protect me, to keep me, to break me, to make sure that I never became the thing she had failed to become. I folded the real letter carefully. I put it in my purse. I drove home and I did not cry, I did not scream, I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and I planned. I went to her house on a Saturday morning. I didn't call first. I wanted to see her face before she could prepare it. She was in the kitchen, wearing a robe that was newer than the one she'd worn 15 years ago but no less pathetic. She was on the phone with her friend Carol, laughing about something, a neighbor's divorce, a bad haircut, the kind of small-town cruelty that passes for conversation among women who have never been allowed to want anything. And Sophie never had those ambitions, you know, thank God. Those creative types are always so unstable. I'm just grateful she's sensible, stays close, helps with Jake. Never gave me a moment's worry. I closed the door behind me, the latch clicked. She turned. Sophie, she said, covering the phone. I wasn't expecting you, I'm on with Carol. I need to talk to you, I said. My voice was even, calm, the voice I used when a student was having a panic attack in my office. Now, she said something to Carol and hung up. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the first flicker of fear. She had always been able to read me before I could read myself. She knew when I was lying about homework, about boys, about where I'd been. And now she was reading something in my face that she didn't recognize. Something hard. Something that had been forged in the 15 years since she struck that match. What is it? She asked. She tried to sound annoyed, but the annoyance was thin, transparent. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the letter, the real letter, the cream-colored envelope with the embossed navy blue return address, and I threw it on the kitchen table. It landed with a slap that echoed in the small room. She looked at it. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She knew what it was. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way her hand moved instinctively toward the drawer where she kept the matches. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "Grandma Helen," I said. "She saved it from your trash. 15 years ago, she left it for me when she died." Linda's face went white, not pale, white, the color of paper, the color of lies. "Sophie," she said. She reached for me. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "Don't touch me. Don't say my name like that. Like I'm still a child you can manipulate. I want you to tell me why. I want you to look at that letter, the one you burned, the one you replaced with your little forgery, and I want you to tell me why you did it." "I did it to protect you," she said. The words came out fast, rehearsed, the same lines she'd used since I was 17. "You weren't ready, you were a child. Those people would have destroyed you. You think you're special, you think you're some great writer, you're not." I got in," I interrupted. My voice didn't rise. That was the thing that seemed to scare her most, my calm. "I got in, Mom, they wanted me, they gave me a full fellowship, they read my poems and they said yes. And you burned it. You looked at my future and you set it on fire. So don't tell me you were protecting me. Tell me the truth. For once in your miserable life, tell me the truth." The silence stretched between us like a wire. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking. The sound of my own heart, steady and furious. "You want the truth?" she said. Her voice had changed. The mother voice was gone. The victim voice was gone. What was left was something raw and ugly. "The truth is that you don't get to leave. You don't get to be the thing I wasn't. I stayed. I married your father. I had Jake. I gave up my voice, my body, my life, and I stayed. And you with your poems and your big dreams and your teacher telling you you're special, you think you get to just walk away. You think you get to be happy." She stepped toward me. Her eyes were bright, feverish, the eyes of a woman who had been waiting 15 years to say this out loud. "I burned it because someone had to," she spat. "Because if you went to Iowa, if you became some famous writer, if you got out of this town and this life and looked back at me from some magazine cover, I would have ceased to exist. I would have been nothing but the woman who stayed while her daughter flew away. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear you." I stared at her. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, the confession, the tears, the justification. But hearing it, really hearing it, was something else. It was not the pain of betrayal. It was the pain of recognition. She had not burned my letter to protect Jake. She had not burned it to protect me. She had burned it because my success would have been evidence of her failure. Because a daughter's joy was an indictment of a mother's surrender. "You were jealous," I said. It wasn't a question. "I was realistic," she snapped, but her hands were shaking. "You think you're so much better than me. You think your poems matter. They don't. Nothing matters. Love doesn't matter. Family doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that you don't get to leave me behind. You don't get to be free if I'm not." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I had been recording since I walked through the door. The red light blinked, steady and small. "Say that again," I said, louder, for the microphone. She looked at the phone, she looked at me. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw the 17-year-old girl she had been, the singer with the bright eyes, the woman who had looked at the camera like she had secrets. She was still in there somewhere, buried under the bitterness and the bathrobes and the burned letters. "You bitch," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "I am. You made sure of that. You burned my letter. You forged a rejection. You told me I wasn't good enough until I believed it. You used Jake to chain me to this town. You used my love for him against me. And now you're going to admit it, not to me, to everyone." I picked up the real letter from the table. I folded it carefully, put it back in my purse, and walked out of the kitchen. She didn't follow me. She stood there in the smell of lemon cleaner and disappointment, and I heard something break behind me, a plate, a glass, her fist against the counter. I didn't turn around. I had what I needed. Jake's birthday was the following Friday. He was turning 26. My mother had planned a dinner, the family, a few cousins, her new boyfriend Gary, who sold insurance and laughed too loud at his own jokes. She had invited me 3 weeks ago, before the letter, before the recording, before the mask had fallen off in her kitchen. I said I would come. I said I would bring a cake. I arrived at 6. The house was full of the noise of people who didn't know each other well, pretending to be close. Gary was telling a story about a claim he'd denied. My cousin Beth was showing photos of her new kitchen. My mother was in the center of it all, wearing lipstick, playing the hostess, the martyr, the woman who had done her best with 2 children and a husband who left. Jake was sitting at the dining table, arranging his napkin into precise folds. He looked up when I came in, and he smiled, a real smile, uncomplicated, the kind that had kept me in this town for 15 years. "Sophie," he said, "you came." "Of course I came," I said. I kissed his forehead. "It's your birthday. We ate. We sang." Gary told another story. My mother laughed too loudly, her eyes darting to me every few seconds, waiting for the axe to fall. She knew something was coming, she just didn't know when. After the cake, after the presents, after the candles were blown out and the plates were cleared, I stood up. I tapped my water glass with a fork. The room went quiet. "I want to read something," I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this in my bathroom mirror for 3 nights. It's a letter I received when I was 17. Some of you know I applied to a writing program back then. What you don't know is that I got in. I pulled out the cream-colored envelope. I read the letter aloud, the offer, the fellowship, the stipend, the words that had been written to me 15 years ago and that I was only now allowed to hear. The room was silent. My mother's face was frozen in a smile that looked like a wound. Mom told me I was rejected, I continued. She showed me a form letter. She said I wasn't good enough. She said I needed to stay and help with Jake. And I believed her. I stayed. I gave up my writing. I gave up my future. I gave up myself because I thought she was protecting me. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the white paper, the forgery. I held it up. "This is the letter she showed me. It's fake. She typed it at the library where she worked. She burned the real one in our kitchen sink. I watched it happen. I just didn't know what I was watching." Gary coughed. Beth put down her wine glass. Jake was looking at our mother with an expression I had never seen on his face, confusion, hurt, a dawning understanding that the world was not arranged the way he had been told. "But that's not the worst part," I said. "The worst part is why, so I'm going to let her tell you herself." I pulled out my phone. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the dining room. Small, tinny, but unmistakable. "I burned it because someone had to. I stayed. I married your father. I had Jake. I gave up my voice, my body, my life, and I stayed. And you with your poems and your big dreams, you think you get to just walk away. You think you get to be happy. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear you." The recording continued. Her confession, her jealousy, her admission that she had destroyed my future not to protect Jake, not to protect me, but to protect herself from the unbearable sight of my freedom. I stopped the recording. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. My mother stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor. Her face was red, blotchy, the face of a woman who had been stripped naked in front of people she had spent her life trying to impress. That's taken out of context," she stammered. I was upset. "I didn't mean Sophie is twisting things. She's always been dramatic. Always lived in a fantasy world, Mom," Jake said. It was one word, one syllable, but it stopped her cold. Jake stood up. He was taller than both of us now. He looked at our mother with eyes that saw patterns she had never understood he could see. "Sophie stayed for me," he said. His voice was clear, precise. The voice he used when he was certain of something. "She didn't stay because she was rejected. You told her she was rejected. You lied. You used me to make her stay. That is not love. That is control. I never asked her to stay. I would have been sad, but I would have been okay. You made her think I needed her forever so she wouldn't leave. That was wrong." He turned to me. "You should have gone, Sophie. You should have gone to Iowa. You should have been a writer. You are a writer. I've read your notebooks, the ones under your mattress. They're good. They're better than good. They're true." I stared at him. I had spent 15 years hiding those notebooks. I had never told a soul. And my brother, my quiet, pattern-seeing, color-speaking brother, had known all along. "You knew," I whispered. "I know everything," he said. "I just don't say everything. I learned that from Mom." He looked at our mother then, and his expression was not angry. It was something worse. It was pity. "I don't want you to come to my appointments anymore," he said to her. "I want Sophie to take me. I want Sophie to make the decisions. You don't get to decide for us anymore." My mother looked around the table at Gary, who was staring at his plate, at Beth, who was looking at her phone with desperate intensity, at the family she had curated and controlled for decades. She saw finally that the story she had written was over. The narrator had lost control. She ran. Not literally, she walked out of the dining room, up the stairs, and slammed her bedroom door. But it was a running away nonetheless. The first time I had ever seen her retreat from a battle she couldn't win. I didn't follow her. I sat back down. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of the cake I had baked, and it was too sweet, and it was perfect. "Happy birthday, Jake," I said. "Happy birthday to me," he agreed. I didn't see her for 3 months. She left me voicemails, angry ones at first, then pleading, then silent ones where I could hear her breathing, waiting for me to speak. I deleted them all. I changed the locks on my apartment. I told the front desk at the college not to let her through. I published my poems. Not through a big press, through a small independent publisher who had read my manuscript and cried the way Mrs. Gable had cried 15 years ago. The book was called The Letter She Burned. It was 8 to 7 pages of everything I had swallowed. Poems about paper turning to ash, about brothers who speak in colors, about mothers who are afraid of their daughter's light, about girls who learn to write in the dark because someone told them the light was not for them. It sold modestly. A few thousand copies. Enough to get me invited to a residency in Iowa, not the workshop which was long behind me, but a small program for emerging writers who had taken the long way around. I went. I sat in cornfields. I wrote sentences that changed no one's life but my own. I walked the same streets I had dreamed about at 17, and I let myself cry for the girl who had stood in the rain, holding an envelope that smelled like her own becoming. I wrote my mother a letter. I never sent it. Linda, I am not going to forgive you. I want you to know that. Forgiveness is not a requirement for moving on. It is not the price of my peace. I have peace without it. I have peace because I finally understand that what you did was not about me. It was about you, about your fear, about your envy, about the life you watched burn while you stood in the kitchen holding the match. I want you to know that I am not angry anymore. Anger is hot and I have cooled. What I feel now is something closer to geography. You are a place I used to live, a country with bad weather and dangerous roads. I do not visit anymore. I do not need to. Jake is thriving. He has a job at the library, shelving books in order of color. He has friends who play chess with him in the park. He asked me last week if I was happy, and I said yes, and he nodded like he had already known the answer. I am happy. Not because I defeated you, not because I exposed you. I am happy because I am riding in the light now, because my voice is no longer a secret, because the letter you burned became the ash I grew my garden in. I do not wish you ill, I simply wish you the life you chose. The small rooms, the small conversations, the smallness that felt so safe you had to break my wings to keep me in the cage with you. I am not in the cage anymore. Sophie, I folded the letter. I put it in a drawer. I will never send it. Some truths are not meant to be delivered. They are meant to be written and held and released. My mother still lives in that house. I hear she doesn't host dinners anymore. I hear Carol stopped calling. I hear Gary left after 3 months because he couldn't handle the drama. I don't know if she sings. I don't know if she burns things when she's alone. I don't know if she has ever read my book. I don't care. I care about my students. I care about my brother. I care about the poem I wrote this morning, and the one I will write tomorrow, and the woman somewhere who will read it and feel less alone. I am not the girl in the rain anymore. I am not the daughter who watched her future turn to ash. I am not the strong one, or the sensible one, or the one who stayed. I am Sophie Brennan. I am 32 years old. I am a writer. And I am finally, gloriously, irrevocably free. If you've ever had someone burn your letter, literal or otherwise, if you've ever been told you weren't good enough by someone who was afraid you might be better, if you've ever swallowed your voice until it became a stone in your chest, this one's for you. You don't need their permission to be brilliant. You never did. The only letter that matters is the one you write to yourself, and the only hand that needs to hold it is yours. The past is ash, but ash is fertilizer. And from it you can grow anything. I'm Sophie, I'm 32, and I'll see you in the next story.